These are the Neewer NP-F970 batteries with the model number NW-F970. So these are lithium-ion batteries and they have a capacity of 56.16 watt-hours. On the battery itself, it actually says that the capacity is 57.72 watt-hours, but on the actual specification of the batteries, it says 56 watt-hours. And the output voltage for them is 7.4 volts. So the use case for NP-F batteries is that they're used in lots of different camera equipment. So for example, when it comes to micro four thirds cameras, they're used in the previous generation of Z cams, and they're also used in a lot of camcorders and live streaming devices, LED panels, lights, monitors, recorders, wireless video transmitters, camera sliders. So using NP-F batteries is essentially unavoidable if you're using camera gear and camera equipment. And this is the charger that comes with it. So the charger has place for 2 NP-F batteries, which you can plug in and then connect for charging. And the charger doesn't have a lock for the batteries, so you can just pull the batteries out. So there's a USB-C input port on the charger, and you can supply 9 volts at 2 amps to it. So if you only have one battery plugged in, then it will use 1.5 amps. But if you have both batteries plugged in, then each battery will get 1 amp. So it will use up the 2 amps that comes with the 9 volts of power. It also has a micro USB port, as you can see there, and you can supply 5 volts at 2.4 amps to it. But you cannot use both of these simultaneously. So you have to either use the USB-C port or the micro USB port. Okay, so I'm gonna connect the USB-C cable, which should power this device, to the charger. And here you can see that it came on. And I'm going to plug in each of these batteries. So here you can see that channel 2 is charging. I don't know if you can see that. And if I plug in the other battery as well, then you can see that both channels have come on and both of them are charging. I hope that's visible on the video. So I'm gonna unplug the USB-C cable and plug in a micro USB. And here you can see that both of them are also charging now. So irrespective of which type of cable you have, micro USB or USB-C, you can essentially charge this with any USB charger. So aside from the charger, if you want to compare this battery itself, Neewer also has different types of NP-F batteries with different capacities. So they do have a NP-F battery which has a higher capacity. So it has the model number TP-F970, and that one has 76 watt-hours as opposed to 56 watt-hours on this, which means that one can provide 20 more watt-hours. So that's substantial. And one of the advantages of that battery instead of this one is that it has a built-in USB charging port. So you can literally plug in a USB cable into the battery itself. And what that means is you don't need to carry a charger with you. You can literally charge the battery just by connecting it to a USB port. And that same USB-C port also serves as a USB-C output port. So you can use the NP-F battery as a power bank and charge your smartphone or anything else that you wanted that. And on the other side of the battery, it also has a USB-A port, and that's just an output port. So again, you can use that to charge a smartphone or any other device that you wanted with it. So essentially the NP-F battery is not just an NP-F battery, but it can also act as a power bank. So you could use it for your camera work, but you could also use it as a power bank to charge your phone. So it's quite useful in that sense. And that one also has a charge level indicator, so you know how full the battery is, and it's also available in white. And one of the advantages of having NP-F batteries that are available in white is that if you're working in sunny and warm conditions, then it reflects the sunlight, so it gets less hot during operation. But that battery alone costs more than these 2 batteries and this charger. So there's an obvious cost difference between those. And a lot of the time when you're using LED panels or live streaming devices, you need 2 NP-F batteries so that you have some redundancy. You can take one out and put in a full battery back in. So I think the only consideration in terms of these batteries or the high capacity Neewer TP-F970 is the cost. But I think the more expensive battery is better overall, and the reason for that is, first of all, it's more portable since you don't need to carry a charger with you and you get more charge out of each battery. But the biggest advantage for me with that battery is that it takes away the cognitive load of having to think about the battery running out, so you know it lasts for a long time. So it takes away one less thing from your mind, so you don't need to think about that. You just focus on the work that you're doing, and you know that it's not going to run out anytime soon. Whereas the lower capacity the batteries are, the more you need to constantly watch them and constantly be vigilant to change the batteries. Whereas with the higher capacity batteries, you don't have that problem. Another comparison of these NP-F batteries is to V-mount batteries. So V-mount batteries typically have larger capacity, so usually they're about 100 watt hours, whereas this one is 56 watt hours. Although there are 50 watt hour V-mount batteries as well. So V-mount batteries typically can provide a higher output power, so high voltage and higher current, which means you can charge multiple devices or run multiple devices of it. And the newer V-mount batteries also have input-output ports like USB-A, USB-C, barrel connectors for dummy batteries, D-tap ports. Whereas with NP-F batteries such as these ones, you can get adapters to get those things. So for example, you can get an NP-F battery adapter, and what that gives you is barrel connectors, USB-C and USB-A, and typically with the barrel connectors you have two different voltages. One would be 8 volts and one would be 12 volts and maybe even 15 volts. So it depends on the peripheral that you want to use. But you also have this solution with battery plates for NP-F batteries. So if you want to have more ports out of the NP-F battery, you can have that. And as I mentioned before, you can get NP-F batteries from Neewer which have the USB ports on them. Alternatively, you could just get one of these NP-F plates, and when you use it with one of these NP-F batteries that don't have USB ports on them, then you get it from the NP-F plate. It just means that you have to carry one extra thing with you, otherwise the functionality would be the same. And there's various different types of NP-F plates that you can get with various different types of output. So you have those ones that sit underneath the camera, and then you have those ones that you can put on top of the camera or on the side of the camera or any part of the camera cage you really want. And even though I mentioned that newer V-mount batteries typically have lots of ports, there are a lot of V-mount batteries that don't have any additional ports. So they might have the D-tap or P-tap port, but they don't have additional ports. And for those, you have to have the same thing as well. So you need to have a V-mount battery plate. So you put the V-mount battery in there, and then you get your D-tap ports, USB ports, and whatever ports that particular battery plate provides. Another alternative to NP-F batteries are USB power banks. So USB power banks tend to be a lot cheaper simply because they're mass produced for everyone who has a smartphone or anything they want to charge. But they do have a lot of disadvantages that comes with that. First of all, they're not natively compatible with camera equipment, so you won't find a camera which essentially runs off a power bank. You can supplement it through USB-C or other forms, or maybe through dummy batteries, but there's no native way to actually use the power bank. Whereas with the NP-F batteries, you can typically insert them onto the camera itself. For example, with the Z cams, they use NP-F batteries, so you literally just put in the NP-F battery into the Z cam and you're running. And the other major big disadvantage of USB power banks is that they usually provide a really low current output, and there are USB power banks that provide a high current output and high power, but those USB power banks cost more than NP-F batteries. So in my opinion, it's not really useful to buy USB power banks unless you have one laying around already which you can use and it provides enough power, because the USB power banks that provide enough power are more expensive than NP-F batteries anyway, and you don't get the flexibility of using them on equipment like LED panels or recording devices or wireless video transmitters. And if they provide enough power, then they will be as expensive or more expensive than NP-F batteries. So if you do want to use USB power banks regardless, then you just have to check what USB ports you have and get the trigger cables for them to, for example, work with a barrel connector for a dummy battery, and assuming that the USB power bank does provide enough output. So if it provides USB power delivery with high voltage and high current, then those trigger cables will work. But if it's an old USB power bank, the trigger cables are not going to work with those low voltages and currents. For example, with the EM1X camera, you need to have at least 9 volts at 3 amps, which is what a lot of power banks can't provide. So in terms of giving you a recommendation, I would say these are really cost-effective NP-F batteries, but if you can afford to buy the higher capacity NP-F batteries, that's obviously better. But remember that one of those batteries costs the same as two of these and the charger, and assuming that your devices need NP-F batteries. If your devices don't need NP-F batteries, then I would say using V-mount batteries might be more practical because you have more flexibility in terms of the power and current that they can output. And one of the disadvantages of NP-F devices is that these pins can break sometimes. So these are the two pins that get inserted into the battery. So the design of these pins are in a way that sometimes they break. And for example, for Z cams, I've seen different attachments that people add to the back of the camera in order to attach the NP-F battery, so that if it breaks, it's just that plate that breaks. It's not going to damage the camera itself. So this is just something to keep in mind whether you want to use NP-F batteries or V-mount batteries. So the alternative again is if you want to use V-mount batteries with NP-F devices, then you need to get an adapter and then connect the adapter here and then connect the cable from the adapter to your V-mount batteries. But I think if you have devices that use NP-F batteries, it's best to use the NP-F batteries on them. And if you want to supplement it as a second source to reduce risk, then you can connect a barrel connector or whatever type of connection it has, like USB-C. So you have both the batteries on the device should your other source of power disconnect, and you have the external source of power which makes it run forever essentially. So I always view batteries on a device as a backup as opposed to the main source of power. So if I'm using the Panasonic Lumix GH6 camera, I have the battery in it, but I don't view that battery as my source of power. I plug in a USB-C cable and that's my source of power, and the battery is just there in case I need to change my USB source of power if that runs out, or if the cable gets unplugged by accident or something. The battery is just there as a risk reduction, not to provide power. And that's the same way I see NP-F batteries. So I don't think using adapters is a good way of powering your device from an external source. I think it should be a combination of NP-F batteries and an external source to make sure you reduce the risk, particularly during long shooting hours, if you're doing live streaming for a sporting event or anything like that. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions about these batteries or the battery charger, and if you want me to compare it to any other batteries or use it on a particular device. This is the Neewer NP-F batteries with a battery charger. So the model number is NW-F970. And the 970, I guess, refers to the similar model number of the NP-F batteries, which is NP-F970. And here you have the voltage and its capacity in milliamps. So 7.4 volts and 7,800 milliamps. The watt hours is actually 56 watt hours. So let me see if I can open this. So this is the instruction manual for the charger, and this is the user manual, declaration of conformity, and product safety warnings and instructions, and disposable end-of-life leaflet. So there's a USB-A to USB-C cable in here. USB-A and then USB-C on this side. And this is the battery charger itself. So it has place for two NP-F batteries. Here's one of the NP-F batteries itself. So here you can see that it says 57 watt hours. And here's another one of the same exact battery.